All right, everyone. Good evening. Hope you're all having a great Sunday, and hope your first round of mentor interviews went really well. I am ecstatic to have our guest on here tonight. I've known him more than half of my life. I'm sorry to make you feel old, but
I mean, it's true. So
that is true. Crazy story, but Mike Roderick from Small Pond Enterprises here with us, and he's going to share a little bit more on insight in terms of relationship building and connecting, and the difference between connecting and networking. So, thank you again for being here.
sure, my pleasure. You want me to just kind of start with story and then go into kind of what?
Sure. Can you still see us? Because you're kind of frozen on your end. Can you still see us? Oh no. Looks like we're having a little bit of a technical issue. We apologize for that, and hopefully we will get him back shortly. But as we were saying, Mike Roderick from Small Pond Entertainment is going to be joining us shortly to share his story on really amazing story how he went from being my high school English teacher to uh, working with incredible entrepreneurs, startups, corporations on building relationships and connecting with different individuals and becoming a quote unquote super connector. Let's see if he's back. Are
There
you?
we go. Yep.
All, all right. So, like I told you before this started, it's like there's something wrong every single time, but we got you back. All right.
For you froze, and then I was kind of like I was like trying to talk and it was just frozen. So I was like, okay, I'll just wait, and looks like we're back. So I think we're
We're
good.
back. All right. So we were about to, while you were gone, they could still see me, but while you were gone, I was mentioning a little bit about your background, but I'd love to have you share a little bit more before we get into the questions.
Sure. My story is I went from being a high school English teacher to a Broadway producer in under 2 years, and a lot of people were very interested in sort of the journey there and how I had made that happen. So I was getting my master's in educational theater. And one of the things I had learned about was simulation. So I started hosting workshops where I would simulate one-on-one meetings, job interviews, and cocktail parties. So basically, have people act out networking scenarios. And from those scenarios, I started to notice a lot of patterns. Based on those patterns, I started to develop frameworks. I started teaching those frameworks first to artists, then people in the business world, and it kind of just kept moving from there to the point where kind of everybody was coming to me about this relationship building process. It led me to found a conference for connectors called ConnectorCon, where I brought a lot of connectors together, write a lot about the topic beyond a number of podcasts and interviews and things of that nature. So I spent a lot of time thinking about the relationship building process. I spent a lot of time thinking about how we connect with people, and always happy to be helpful wherever I can.
You are always helpful, and you've always been helpful. And just a little fun fact, I think you kind of saw it in our Facebook group. When you see that I write an agenda every Monday, I got it from
Mm.
this guy.
That's yeah. That I mean, that's what I did with your class. I do remember that. Used to have an agenda for you guys every day.
Yep, he wrote it on a little index card, and then he had either him, or if he wasn't feeling like it, one of us write it on the blackboard.
Yep. That's right. That's the thing. On certain days and certain classes, I couldn't really take my eye off of the class. Like I learned that if I turned my back and actually tried to write on the chalkboard, somebody would like throw something out the window, or something would happen. So when I figured, oh, wait a second, a student can write it on the board, and then I can actually look at the class and make sure nobody's doing any of that stuff, I found it was particularly effective.
So going from writing agendas on the blackboard to kind of our little segue into relationship development.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just so funny that well, for me as your student, and then seeing you now, like that full circle of how you've been able to not just help yourself but also help other people as well, uh, build relationships, maintain them, and then also enhance them by providing value on both ends. But one of the things that at least I've seen on my end, I'm sure you've seen on your end as well. A lot of people kind of say that networking and connecting are very similar or the same thing.
Mhm.
And they always equate it to building relationships with people professionally. But there's a very distinct difference. So, in your opinion, from working with all these different groups of people, what's the difference between connecting and networking, and how do we
Sure.
know if we're doing it right?
Sure. So basically, the way that you want to think about it is that networkers operate on a horizontal and connectors operate on a vertical. So what that means is that networkers are almost always introducing people at either the same level or in the same industry. And networkers are constantly in this mindset of sort of climbing a ladder, right? So they're always making introductions for the purpose of trying to move their business forward, trying to make things happen for themselves. A lot of the time it's either a very even exchange if they're going to help somebody or support somebody, or it's an uneven exchange where they're going to probably benefit more than whoever it is that they're reaching out to. Whereas connectors operate on this vertical side of things. So connectors are thinking, okay, who is above me, and also who is below me? Who could learn? Who's kind of in the early stages of the work that they're doing? And connectors aren't bound by one industry. So in essence, they're always helping people in other industries. They're always helping people in other worlds. They're threading those worlds together. So the way I always look at it is that if you think about networking, networking is like climbing a ladder, and connecting is like spinning a web, where in essence you're sort of threading the people together in your network. You're always thinking about how can you help the other person
Yeah,
become successful while keeping that balance of letting people know what it is that you actually need. And that's a danger that a lot of people get into because there's a lot of bad advice out there, specifically on relationship building, specifically with the idea of reciprocity. So a lot of people kind of put things in the context of, oh, if you do this, then you're going to get something in return. But if you do something with the expectation that somebody's going to give you something in return, you're not really giving a gift. You're making a transaction. The other person just doesn't know it's a transaction. So in the relationship building space and the connecting space, you're giving, you're helping people, you're supporting them, it's building credibility, and you're letting them know when you need something, but you're not expecting that they're going to give you something based on the fact that you gave them something before. You're just expecting that they're open to hearing from you and having a conversation with you and seeing if you can solve the problem.
definitely. I 100% agree with you. And I love that you brought up the balance, because in relationships, there always has to be a balance, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life. And finding that balance is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I
Yes.
love the fact that you really brought up that it's really part of this big web. And that
Mhm.
when we're connecting with people, we're spinning in this web. And it's something you kind of ingrained on me 10 years ago. It's like you're spinning a web.
Yeah.
And it's not Charlotte's Web, but it's a web that belongs not just to you, but also to the other people in your community. And you should really look at uh, your friends, your acquaintances, your connections, not just as a network, but also as a community, and really try to help them in that way and really approach it that way versus, okay, it's kind of like instead of mixing and matching, it's really actual community building, but you just don't really realize you're doing it until you're actually doing it.
Yeah, and the thing I always like to say is that people love to feel useful, they hate to feel used. So if you're able to get somebody to feel like they're contributing to moving something forward or helping you in some way, then they're going to be happy about that because they feel useful. They feel like, okay, I'm supporting you, I'm doing something for you, I'm moving the needle for you, and that gives them a good feeling. But when you treat somebody like they're a tool to either get to something else or to get to something that you want, they feel used. And when somebody feels used, they don't really want to be around you anymore because they see themselves as this tool in essence to get whatever the other person is after. So it's more about helping people feel like they're part of the conversation with you. They're part of the growth. They're part of the process, as opposed to, oh, I need this thing from you, or I'm looking for this thing from you. And once you've given me that thing, or once you've done that thing, I don't need you anymore, which is one of the biggest problems that pops up all the time, where a lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm going to support you. I'm going to help you. You know, in this particular way." They support the person, they help them, they do all this stuff, and then down the line, somebody comes back and is like, "Well, I did this for you, and you should be doing this for me," and that just damages the relationship because
Definitely.
whoever asked you or reached out to you, they they didn't tell you that they had that expectation. They didn't tell you that they were going to come back about that. So it's really, really important to pay attention to that balance and to really make sure that people feel like they're a part of the process with you as opposed to just a tool in the process. And it actually reminds me of something I was talking to another entrepreneur about, which is the idea that if people feel like they're working for you, then in essence, they're much more likely to leave. They're much less likely to stay with you. If people feel like they're working with you, they're much more likely to stay. And you really want to treat the relationships that you have as they're working with you. They're helping you achieve the things that you want to achieve, but you're helping them achieve the things that they want to achieve. So it's all helping and supporting each other. There's a metaphor that I use from one of these Aesop's fables, and it's
Hmm.
about this crow. And there's this pitcher of water, and basically the crow's trying to drink from the pitcher, but the crow can't get the water at the bottom of the pitcher. So what does he do? He starts dropping stones into the pitcher, and eventually the water rises, and the crow is able to drink. And we're like the pitchers. We only have so much water. We only have so much money. We only have so much time. We only have so many connections, etc. But the people that we help and that we support, they're the stones. And all of that water rises, and then we're all able to benefit together. So you always want to look at it from that angle. If you're developing relationships, it's about, great, this is helping me, but how is it helping the other person? And in addition to that, the next level of that is, how is it helping the community that this whole side of things is a part of? How is what I'm doing making the world a better place, in addition to helping me achieve my goals and helping the other person achieve their goals? And really sort of pulling it out and looking at it from that perspective.
Definitely. And I think that's your last point really gives a great segue into our next subject about adding value.
Hmm.
So, most of the people who are listening to us or watching us right now, they are either in college or they just recently graduated. Uh, One of the things that we're doing with the program is connecting them with mentors and teaching them how to connect with other professionals. But on their end, they don't really have much of the skills and the experience to really say, look, I can help you in this particular way because you're helping me, and try to act out that balance. So I wanted to ask, like, what are the top three things that college students and recent grads can provide these industry mentors and professionals in return for their advice and their tutelage and their knowledge?
Well, the very first thing is providing them with feedback on what they've told you. A lot of the time when you have a mentor or you have somebody who's supporting you, I see this mistake all the time where you give somebody advice, you tell them, this will help you, or this will help move your business forward or whatever, and then they go off, and in some cases they do it, or in some cases they don't, but you never really ever hear from them again. So one of the main points of value, if you do get a chance to meet with somebody and they've mentored you and they've helped you, one of the main ways that you can add value to them is to go back and say, I did what you said, and here's what I learned. Here's what I discovered. Or, I did what you said, and this worked really well for me, and I wanted to say thank you. It's absolutely amazing how many people just kind of throw away the opportunity to make a thank you have some meaning So a lot of the time what tends to happen is people will send you an email and it'll be like, thanks, THX or whatever the scenario is. But they're not saying, this is what you did for me and this is what it meant. These were the results. And the thing is, if people feel like they see results from what they're doing, they're going to want to do it more. So if you're a college student and you're being mentored, if you let your mentors know what helped you or what supported you, that's going to motivate them to keep mentoring you. But if you just sort of disappear after they've given you that advice or helped you out, then you're not going to be top of mind for these people. The second thing that I would say a lot of students forget about is the fact that you are on the cusp of all sorts of new technologies, new platforms, new
Definitely.
areas of information. You're the ones who are learning about these things because you're in this highly technological world. So a lot of the people that you're mentoring, even though you may think, oh, everybody knows about this app or everybody knows about this resource or everybody knows about this platform where people can write about their stuff or everybody knows that Be Live is a thing that you can use to do Facebook lives, right?
Yep.
Even though you think everybody knows it, most of your mentors don't. Most of your mentors are focused on their thing and what's going on in their life. And the mistake I would say 90% of college students, I would say anybody who's sort of early on in their career, is that they immediately assume that the things that they know are not valuable to somebody at a higher level. But you don't know until you have that conversation, until you make that suggestion. So the thing is, you've got to talk to these people about where are they? What are they interested in? And they may give you information that gives you ideas of, okay, this is how I could support this person, or this is what I could send their way, or this is what I could let them know about. And that aspect of just like providing the ideas behind the unknowns, basically being like, here are these things that basically other people don't know about. It could be a book, it could be a tech resource, it could be something that you learned in one of your classes that's kind of new research, whatever it is, those unknowns are super valuable to any kind of mentor or anybody who's helping you within that capacity. And then the last one is basically press is a completely different game than it used to be. So it used to be that there were only a certain number of editors, there were a certain number of publishers of content, and you either got your book or your piece or your story in the New York Times or one of the larger platforms, and that was pretty much it. But now everybody's contributing to some kind of platform. People are writing for Inc., people are writing for Entrepreneur, people are writing for Forbes. So if whoever you're mentoring is doing something really cool, find other people who write about those cool things. And I always tell people when they're looking to get press, I always say be a source, not a subject. So if you go to somebody and you pitch them on, you should write about me, you can get away with that pitch once, maybe twice if you're lucky. But if you go to somebody who writes for a publication and you say, hey, I'm curious, what are the topics that you write about? And then you just keep sending them people who you think would be a good idea or good stories, they're going to develop a deeper relationship with you than anybody else who's just pitching them all the time. And as college students, you have a lot of opportunity there because most people who are in the press have, they're looking for what's the next thing. They're looking for what's interesting. So you developing those relationships at this early stage, it's only going to carry with you for the rest of your life. Making press contacts and developing relationships with people who have larger platforms is one of those things that will carry throughout the rest of your life. It doesn't matter what business you go into. If you know people who can write to large numbers of people, it will support you no matter what industry you end up in. So developing that relationship early and then being able to provide opportunities for your mentors to connect with some of those press contacts that you've developed and some of those people who are writing that, that you've met, that can be huge.
that all three of those things, I think, are just useful in their own on their own. But when you string them together in terms of building relationships, and especially if you are kind of on that lower end and uh, they are more of that on that expert end, I think that whole process as a whole really will help students and just anyone who's just in this position where they're seeking to learn and they need more tutelage. To get to that next level, because you're taking the time to not just think about how they answer your questions, but also how you can answer theirs. And
Mm.
I think, like we were talking about earlier with balance, being able to provide those connections to their press, or really stay on top of things that they might be interested, or even asking. I think this is really good one, asking what they need in that initial conversation, even if you can't provide it immediately, or you can't provide it for a year or so. You might know someone or meet someone down the road who might be able to help them.
Yeah.
And
And it's a perfect response when somebody has done something for you, right? That you just go to them and you say, like, once you thank them, you just say, even if you're in the middle of the conversation and they've just done something, they've given you some piece of advice, you're just like, you know, yes, I'm in college right now, but is there anything right now that you're focused on that I could be helpful with? And I'm happy to help in any way if there is something, and you can really frame it in the context of you don't know what would be helpful. And in a lot of cases, people will answer with all sorts of different types of things. Maybe one of these mentors is looking for somebody to intern a couple of hours a week and needs somebody to help with that, and maybe that's you, or maybe that's somebody that you know. Maybe they're a dog lover and you happen to know of a really really great dog park. Like, there's so many different avenues that you can go once you ask that question. Once you say to this person, hey, you know I'm curious, what's your focus right now, what are you trying to accomplish, and you just think about how you can help them become more successful. When I look back on my Broadway sort of background, it really always came down to every single producer that I met, my goal was always, how do I make this producer more successful? And the more that I would just sort of keep that in mind, I would get lots of opportunities, but I would also just have lots of people who wanted to introduce other producers to me, because I was always thinking about, how can I help this person become more successful? What can I do to make their life better? And if any of you on this are thinking about starting your own business or creating your own thing, like, that's at the heart of it. Like, every success in business comes down to this aspect of figuring out, how are you going to make the client's life better, and you just devote yourself to that process. So if you approach your mentors in the same way, where you're just like, how can I make my mentor's life better? If every day you just ask that question, this mentor was great to me, how can I make that mentor's life better? You'll start coming up with ideas, and you'll send them stuff. And they'll be like, wow, this person's thinking of me, because so rarely do people get mentored and then the other person thinks of them. It's very
definitely.
very rare. People run off and do whatever it is because they're living their lives. The idea of considering what somebody else wants, it seems like it would be common knowledge. It seems like we should all just kind of be in this place of what thinking about how other people feel and thinking about what other people want. But the fact of the matter is, most of the time we have this, I call them asking blinders, where we're so focused on the things that we want to get that we're not paying attention to what the other person wants or what the other person's looking for. And as a result, we're missing all of this valuable information, and we're also missing all these ways to potentially help this person and solve their problems.
Definitely. And something that, again, you taught me a while back that you kind of just hammered home was, it's not about you. It's
Mm-hmm.
about them. And if you
Yep.
just keep go into a conversation thinking that, you'll benefit as well.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And it's one of those things where if you are focused on the other person, this is a great hack in terms of just nerves, right? Like, let's say you meet somebody who's really high profile, you get that mentorship opportunity, etc. You're going to feel this like heightened pressure. You're going to be The hack, the mental shift is if you just focus on that other person and focus.
Okay, I think we lost him again in the middle of thought. Our apologies again for the live stream. Looks like we lost Michael Roderick for the moment. We're going to see if we can get him back. What he's saying in terms of his train of thought, you know, going into a conversation, uh, trying to identify how you can help that person, and just solely going how they can help, how you can help that person will move mountains. Back?
I'm back.
Okay, cool. All right, I was trying to fill in the blanks while you were gone, but
Yep.
do you still remember where you left off?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay,
It's one of those things where if you're able to support the other person, your nerves will just drop. So like the more you're thinking about the other person, the more you're trying to sort of answer their questions and even asking them questions about themselves, the less concerned you're going to be about like how you look and how you sound and like all these different types of things. So it's this really, really powerful mental hack that gets you out of that place of being tongue-tied when you meet somebody at a super super high level, because a lot of the time what happens is we have people that we admire or that we hope we can get a chance to meet, and sometimes through all sorts of random occurrences we end up meeting that person. But most of the time the problem is we get so gummed up in our own emotions about the whole thing that we don't actually make the best use of that time. So if you just go from this angle of it's not about me and it's not about my emotions, it's not about how I'm feeling right now, it's about this person, and it's what can I learn from them, what can I ask them, what can I learn about them, then that's all it comes down to. If you're just able to sit and listen, the nerves are going to go away.
great. And before we wrap up our conversation this evening, wanted to ask you if you shared incredible insight and advice for uh, those of us who are listening, who are watching this tonight, and whenever they come to view this video. But what other piece of advice would you give to a young professional, a student, a recent grad that's just starting their career, that kind of doesn't know where to go, but they know that they have to go out and meet people, meet someone, they don't know who, but what piece of advice would you give them?
So I would say probably what's the most useful thing is find other people who are dealing with the same kinds of things that you're dealing with and get together and solve problems. Because a lot of the time, what happens is our problems seem unsurmountable. A lot of the time, when we are just like we're alone and we're thinking about them and we're frustrated because we get inside of our own heads. But you get together with four or five other people, and so many times they like hear what you're talking about and they're like, oh, that's not really an issue. You just do X, Y, and Z, right? Because they have a different perspective. They can see things in a different way. So a lot of time when you're struggling, it's the metaphor that I like to use that it's like your face is up against the TV screen. And if your face is up against the TV screen, all you're going to see are colored pixels. So you need somebody behind you to tell you what's on TV. And most importantly, you need somebody to tell you if it's time to change the channel. So if you're struggling and you're like, what do I do? Where do I go? What's my next step? Ask yourself who else is struggling? Who else is trying to figure this all out? And then say, why don't like the five or six of us get together at a coffee shop and talk about our problems? Because one person's going to have insight into somebody's issues, another person's going to have a completely different sort of take on the experience. So you're going to find a lot of opportunities there. And the mistake that I see a lot of people make when they're first starting out is that they think that you start out alone and you build your community from there. But you start by finding other people who also feel alone, and then you have a community. And then you talk to each other about what do you need. And then you help each other move that needle and make things happen, and you don't feel alone anymore. So a lot of people think, oh, I got to go out there and I've got to build community or I've got to meet people or etc. There are already people that you've gone to school with, that are in the same boat as you, that are doing the same things, that are dealing with the same challenges, set up time to get together, and you can collectively solve each other's problems, and you're probably going to have a much better experience.
It all starts with taking initiative and asking questions. That's what it all
Yep.
comes back to. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything, all your insight with us this evening. I really appreciate it. And for those of us who are watching right now who want to connect with you and keep in touch, and also um, learn more from you. I know you have a blog.
Sure, sure. They can go to smallpondenterprises.com. That's my site. There is a PDF that you can download called Hang with Your Heroes, which basically kind of breaks down some of the psychology that you're dealing with when you reach out to higher level people. And then if you download that PDF, you're invited to join my daily email, where basically I give lots of different tips and insights into this process, and always happy to help, in any way I can. I'm on all the different platforms, so you can always feel free to reach out, and happy to be helpful any way I can.
It's great. Well, thank you again for sharing all this, and also for being such an incredible positive impact on my life. I always tell you this when we do these types of things, but without you, I don't know if I would have been able to do any of this stuff. So
Oh, well, that's very
thank you.
that's very kind. So it's, I think you give folks the tools, and then they take them, they either take them and run with them, or they look at them, right? And you're one of those people who takes the tools and runs with it. So give yourself credit. Really important, but I certainly appreciate that.
Great. So we're going to end the conversation there. And thanks all of you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this as much as we did, especially through our little breaks in between. And we'll be back soon with another lesson for all of you. Thanks. Okay.